everyone, this is Susan Walcott, and thank you for joining this webinar. I think it's great that you're taking time out today to learn about patterns of thinking. I will discuss with you briefly 5 patterns of thinking from developmental psychology. Before I get started with my presentation, I would like to learn a little bit about you so that I can get a sense of the audience. So I'm going to post a couple of polling questions, one at a time. The first polling question is about where you are located. I am now showing you the results of the first poll. Not surprisingly, most of you are from North America. We also have some participation from South America. Now let me post the second poll to gain an idea about what you are personally interested in learning today. I am now showing you the results of the second poll. The majority of you, 88%, are interested in higher education teaching or faculty development. That's not surprising since the information about the webinar referred to higher education, but we've also have participants interested in workplace development, and that's something I've been interested in for a long time. So as I go through the webinar, I'm going to share with you some thoughts directly related to both areas. Now let me briefly share with you a little bit of motivation as to why I personally am interested in patterns of thinking. I've been a classroom teacher for a long time. Although I'm not currently a full-time faculty member, I still teach at least one course per year, and I do a lot of faculty development at colleges and universities. One of the things that I've learned is that if I can tune into my students' thinking and the patterns of thinking, then I can do a much better job of meeting their needs, designing learning activities that will be more effective, and actually see better student performance. I assume that these motivations are probably similar to yours. One of the things that I learned when I was first introduced to these patterns of thinking over 20 years ago was that they explained a lot of what I observed in the way my students responded to learning activities. I hope that you will experience some of that same insight today as you learn about these patterns. The main topic of today's webinar is to introduce 5 patterns of thinking, so that's where we will spend most of our time. Then at the very end of the webinar, I will discuss some of the implications. We don't have time in a 1-hour webinar to go into much detail. The diagram that you're seeing now on the screen is a model called Steps for Better Thinking. I won't have time today to discuss the model in depth, but I will come back to it at the end. The reason I'm showing it to you now is that you will hear me during the webinar refer to some skills, specifically to Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, and Step 4 skills. These skills correspond to the diagram, so I just wanted to give you a visual to help you understand what I mean when I refer to Step 1 skills and so on. Then at the end of the webinar, I will come back and describe this diagram in more detail. The main topic for today's webinar is this set of 5 patterns of thinking. I will start on the left side of this diagram and discuss the lowest pattern of thinking and then proceed sequentially to each of the higher patterns. When looking at this diagram, you might be wondering why the numbering starts at 0 and goes through 4, instead of simply going from 1 to 5. But once I describe pattern 0, hopefully this will make more sense. These patterns are based on a particular model out of developmental psychology. Some of you probably are already familiar with the model. It is King and Kitchener's reflective judgment model. The patterns I will introduce today are based on King and Kitchener's adult-level cognitive stages, which they refer to as stages 3 through 7. At the end of the webinar, I will provide you with some resources to learn more about this model. I would also like to point out that I will use my own labels in conjunction with King and Kitchener's model, so the terms that you see in this diagram are not King and Kitchener's language. They do not put labels onto each pattern. I like to use labels because I think it helps people, especially when they are first learning about the patterns, to grasp the concepts more quickly. I will now introduce these patterns one at a time. After each pattern is introduced, I will pause and give you an opportunity to reflect and answer a poll about how frequently you encounter each pattern. So as I introduce it, I want you to sort of think about the students you teach or the people you work with and try to kind of visualize what proportion of them are operating at each of these patterns.